Thank you. So what is an analyst doing speaking on this topic? I mean, particularly a guy who was at Gartner. I learned two things at Gartner about being an analyst. One is the analysts that got the highest evaluations consistently, conference after conference, said very little in their presentation that you didn't already know, but they gave a great performance. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever been to a Gartner conference? You work on giving great performances, but they don't do research. Legitimate research. As an analyst, I could get away with talking to maybe 5 companies. I could go out and say, well, there's a trend. I'm going to tell you all about it. Because I worked for Gartner, people would just believe it. And I knew that I needed to do a lot more research, not just anecdotal research, but some topics really required very, very deep data collection and analysis. And I never thought I'd be up here doing what I'm doing. I never thought in a million years, 20 years later, I would have a company that is a research company that focuses on an area that to this day is still difficult to find in any, in any industry analyst firm. The way I got into it is this. I wanted to start the first CIO research service in the business. Couldn't do it at Gartner. They were not interested in selling to CIOs. I mean, think about that. They were not interested in having conversations with the top leader in technology in these companies. Their model was to sell to second and third level people and talk about vendor issues, products, interoperability, cutting through the hype, and that's important. But when I went to Metagroup, who would start this service, and Metagroup, as you may know, the 2 people who founded Gartner had kind of a business divorce, and therefore Metagroup came to be. He said to me, I would like to start a CIO service because I don't talk to CIOs either. You would be the only person here that would really be talking to CIOs. And I said, fine. What do you suppose was the thing that they wanted to talk about most? I always ask them, what are the top 10 issues that you have where you need to get answers? 7 out of 10 of those consistently, and all the time I ran this service for 4 years, were about people. Finding them, keeping them, paying them, building teams that could produce performance, high performance again and again and again. I mean, they started to realize that it's just a small number of people in their company who could get things done on time, on budget, and effectively, and really understood how to get things done. And they would go to them again and again and again, and they would burn these people out, and they would leave the company. You probably know people, or you might be that person in your company. And they started to realize, no, I need teams of people, lots of people that can do this work, and I'm not going to grow in my career unless I know how to do this and be able to do it across 50 projects, not just 5. So what happened is, as I began to look at how to fulfill this need, and let me show you a little bit about me, I started saying, well, number one, I understand compensation, because at the very bottom of this, although I've been an analyst for years, I started in HR, and I was a compensation guy. And when they said, I can't find a whole lot of jobs that we have in compensation surveys, my HR department says they just don't even exist. Now, at this time, in the 90s, you couldn't find a web developer in any compensation survey. You couldn't find a Unix or NT systems administrator in any compensation survey. You couldn't find data warehouse professionals, business intelligence people. So what I did is I said, look, all right, I know what these people are. What I'll do is I'll create the job descriptions, and you guys will give me all of your data. We'll match them to a common set of job descriptions, and let's see if that would produce what would be a reasonable salary that you could hire or retain people using. And so we did it. We did it in the Bay Area, and it worked. And they said, this is exactly what recruiters are telling me I have to pay. Also at the time, when salary surveys did have a number, again, the HR department would say, this is the number. They would say, I can't hire somebody. They were very, very low. And the reason they were low is because they were starting to understand that one of the things that drives pay in technology are hot skills. It's just 1 or 2 things that person knows that differentiates them as a programmer or a software engineer from everyone else in the company that does that thing. It could be a process skill. a framework skill, it could be a technical skill, but that could increase their salary 10 or even 20%. So what I did is I created the first salary surveys in the industry for web jobs. There were about 16 of them at that time. These are architects, engineers, developers, analysts. Then I did the data warehouse. Then I did business intelligence. That was all 20 years ago. And then we did e-commerce, business technology, which were these people I started meeting in companies. Now it's, and part of what you'll hear by the end of this presentation is, it's hard to find a job now that doesn't require a union of IT and business in the same person. It's hard to find a job that isn't hybrid these days. I suppose, I still meet COBOL programmers, by the way. I do. In fact, you know, God bless the fact that our economy tanked and so many of these people who thought they'd be retired by now are not retired because they're COBOL programmers and assembly programmers, and they're worth a lot of money in the market because there's very few of them, and believe it or not, people still do applications in COBOL, in data centers in particular. So anyway, not to belabor the point, but to say tonight is either going to frighten you, just the stuffing right out of you, or it's going to show you, it's going to harden your resolve to do something about your career. Because I can't think about a time, other than maybe the beginning of the web, you know, the internet and the adoption of that in business, that a better time to be a software engineer or a programmer. I think this is the best time in terms of your opportunities, your ability to make money, your ability to influence and make impact. And so I agreed to write an article covering some of our analysis in this, some of the broader issues, which I'll start maybe the first half of my presentation. I'll talk about that. Also in this article, you see a lot of numbers, because one of the things I discovered along the way is that there were companies that were starting to put a price on skills, saying, you know, salary alone is not enough to be able to fix this compensation issue. What I've got to do is isolate those skills, those special skills that are differentiating people, that are hot, and that recruiters are coming and only taking my developers with these skills, or this platform, or these process skills, or this framework. They don't want anyone else. They want Java people that have this skill, not just any Java person. And it doesn't matter whether they have 10 years of experience or 15 or 5. They just want people that have done this solution in this industry for this customer, and they're Java developers. So what I want to do tonight is I want to take you through the scary part. Hang on a second. There we go. The scary part first, and then I'm going to give you some solutions. And by the end of this presentation, you probably will know what a reasonable compensation number would be for you, because I've put a lot of positions in this. And we're going to look at a lot of skills, because we track the market values of 880 certified and non-certified skills, 468 non-certified skills, 412 certifications. Because companies do pay, in addition to salary, guaranteed bonuses, cash bonuses, not targets, but guaranteed for skills and certifications. First hard reality, this was in 2015. John Chambers, you all know him, founder and CEO for Cisco for many years. I don't know if he's still chairman, but back in 2015 he was, and he was addressing a group of executives at a Wall Street Journal forum. And this is what he said: 40% of companies in this room won't exist in a meaningful way in 10 years unless they change dramatically. 40%. Now, if you have any doubt about the veracity of this statement, look at this. Only 12% in 60 years who are in the Fortune 500 are still there. And of those people who were gone, half of them disappeared from 1999 to 2009. What was happening in 1999 to 2009? Anybody? What was happening that would have dumped so many companies out of the Fortune 500? I'm sorry? Web, internet, right. We're sort of at that place right now. A lot of companies don't set out to be acquired, by the way. They don't set out to be merged or acquired. Talk to anybody who has been merged or acquired, and they'll say what this was a failure of leadership to be able to see something coming and to be able to be competitive at that time. We didn't make it because we were weak, and then we got picked off. So a lot of companies between 1999 and 2009 could not make that quantum leap in terms of what it would do to their business, their products, their services, how they're delivered, how they're supported. They couldn't get it. By the time they got it, their stock was weak enough that they got picked off. Now, I'd say some of these people, it was probably a good merger, a merger of strength, but a lot of these companies, lost their way. And we're right at that same point right now. Have you noticed that last year was like the biggest year of mergers and acquisitions in history? A lot of companies got picked off. They're not making the shift to the digital world. Or they're making it, but they're not making it quick enough because it's difficult. At the basis of this is strategy. And it's not that companies don't have strategies. What I've discovered is because they can't find the people to deliver those strategies. They can't do it consistently, and that's kind of why we're here tonight. Anybody doubt this statement? It's a shocking statement when you think of it, because things are moving so fast right now. But right now is probably the slowest technology change will ever be in your lifetime. Right now, slowest. I look at it like this. What's about to happen to all of those cars and those buildings? What's about, and the people in them? What's about to happen? Yeah, they're going to die probably. Okay, well, this is my metaphor. All those buildings are your functional areas of the business departments. That's not all of them, but that represents most of them, those buildings. And then what you have is tech support. Again, not everything, architecture, database networks. We have most of it covered in there. And that's what that is. That's disruptive technology and influencers. If you can see a tsunami, you're dead. If somebody tells you, in a week, this tsunami is going to be here, or maybe 3 days, you can get to higher ground. But a lot of companies, I think, are caught right now in seeing the tsunami before, and it's too late. That's, again, why I think we have so many mergers and acquisitions right now. They didn't see it in time, or they saw it in time, and they just didn't have the resources to do it. They might have even had the money, but again, money is not going to buy you a workforce. Because the people who have a lot of money still complain that they can't find people, and they have to develop them internally, and that takes time. The other thing I think is going on with this picture is, and I want to talk about this, although I know that this isn't a security audience, but as I'm going to point out to you, because cybersecurity is such an understaffed part of a business. In fact, security has been understaffed for a long time, but because cyber is a radically understaffed, they're going to look to all of you, to developers and software engineers, to help solve, if not lead in the solution to security, because they can't stop people from coming into their systems. But they can write code that can make it harder. So I just think there's going to be a lot of pressure on you. So I want to talk about security a little bit to this audience tonight as part of my address. So what are these disruptors? Let's just take a look at these for a second. I put some sizing on some of them too, just to show you exactly how dramatic the growth of these are. It's not a complete list. I mean, it's probably 2 slides, again, as long as those. But I think the ones that I want to talk about tonight are these. I want to talk about, because of you, because of what you guys are doing. Internet of Things and telematics. I want to talk about machine language and AI. I want to talk about digital engagement, which is really the theme of this. I want to talk about what globalization, urbanization is doing to the software industry and to everybody who works in it. And I want to talk about cyber threats. Okay? All right, now here's an interesting chart, because this is one of those XY charts that, in this case, increasing value and increasing likelihood. So everything up in the upper right-hand corner are things that companies find they want to do. There's value, and there's a very high likelihood in this case that they're going to do it. And of course, on this chart, you find digital business models and Internet of Things. But isn't Internet of Things also big data analytics? Isn't it also mobile? Isn't it also cloud and machine learning? To me, that's all IoT. And as you saw before, IoT is it could be an $11 trillion economic impact in a very short amount of time, under 10 years. It looks like the big players right now in IoT, for those of you, I'm presuming that this is a pretty good cross-section of industries. But it's automotive, it's the public sector, it's health and human services, retail, and factories, manufacturing. That seems to be where the biggest opportunities, the biggest growth are. Okay, so I'm giving you a little more sizing. I'm going to move ahead fairly quickly through this section because I want to get to the numbers, because I think the numbers are something you'll find very interesting. Okay, let's look at the things side of IoT. You think this isn't something for software programmers? Well, it is, but it's really something more or less for electrical engineers. It's a lot of device stuff. It's a lot of hardware. It's network engineers, design engineers, hardware engineers, GPS development engineers, software engineers, AI engineers. There's a lot of software, system software in this, but there's also application software as well. But it's really a lot of hardware. And it's been a long see, this is why IoT is such a great play, even for hardware engineers. I mean, it's a great time to be working in technology. There are so many jobs, so much need coming down the pike, just on this side. Now, I'm not going to talk about the internet because we have been in this business a long time. Everybody knows what we're talking about when we talk about the internet. So let's talk about the connecting of the I and the T in IoT. These are just a smattering of what I think are the hot jobs and hot skills right now and gaining acceleration, some more than others. And let's just spend a moment, take a look at this list. I do want to call your attention to the cross-skilling part. Hardware skills for software developers, software skills for hardware developers. That, to me, is very interesting, that as we get into this IoT world, and we're here right now, is that more and more of you are going to be asked to take on hardware skills, more hardware skills than you probably have right now. We started seeing this in virtualization, by the way, with software engineers and hardware engineers having to understand each other's jobs a little more and their responsibilities. We started seeing cross-skilling, but with IoT, you're really going to see cross-skilling. Any comment on this chart? Anything that's missing, like dramatically missing from this chart? If not, we'll press on. So let's talk about some security trends. The first one, 25 billion connected devices by 2020 and as many as 1 trillion by 2025. So again, you're seeing, again, this pace of change, this acceleration. Those are the accelerated numbers right now, right there. That's if you believe these numbers. Now Gartner predicting that by 2020, more than 25% of identified cyber attacks in enterprises will involve IoT. It seems like a low number to me, but I think that it's reasonable to put that up on a slide. IoT security market, $7 billion market last year, but IoT right now accounts for less than 10% of IT security budgets on average. That's a Gartner number too. That a Gartner prediction too. Now, to me, that starts saying, well, then who is going to do security? And I do think that this is another indication that more and more security is going to fall into the laps of developers and software engineers. You're going to be asked to do more and more of this secure coding and more stuff than that. Again, you're going to be working on, some of you on the hardware side with this, so you're not going to be alone. But it's going to be a very different effort because what we have going on right now is not working. The fact that every time you hear about a breach in the news these days, when was the last time you heard of a breach where they didn't say that the bad guys had been in the system for less than 18 months? You hear it all the time. The system was compromised 2 years ago, and they just discovered it now. And that's a whole different kettle of fish. if you're in the security business, the cybersecurity business, is how, if we assume that people are in our system, how did they get in, who are they, and where are they going to get in next? I mean, it's not a question of if they're going to get in, but where are they going to get in? Okay, so the digital evolution is changing risk, and these are just, again, a handful of things, but let's go through them real quickly. Why I think this is true. Adoption of smart grid devices for the water and power industry. More tech inside of phones, laptops, tablets, IP-enabled home appliances. You saw I think it was they had millions of hits on YouTube. The guy that turned a toaster into a mouse. Did you see that one? He turned just an ordinary toaster into a mouse. You can now turn, these IP addressable appliances like refrigerators and things. See, the more and more we have those, the more and more possibility of hacks we're going to have. I don't know what that refrigerator would be connected to. It might be connected to your personal computer. So those hackers will get into your computer through a refrigerator, but that's happening right now. Proliferation of devices, the app market, we talked about that. Pervasive wearables, updating social computing all the time. How many of you have a wearable, like a Fitbit or something like that? Do you know when you walk into stores, they're reading it? Yeah. What I love is that movie, Minority Report. Did you see that movie with Tom Cruise? What Steven Spielberg did is he got together the best thinkers in the world, and he said, let's think about what the world will be like in 2046, 2047. And in that world, yeah, you walk into a store, it reads your retina, and it starts telling you where to go and what to buy in the store. It knows who you are, what you do, what you spend, when you spend it. We're there right now, but it will, again, we're talking about how much data there is out there and how much people know about us. This is interesting. This came from Spiceworks. How many people follow Spiceworks? It's a really interesting, it's really an interesting place to get. As an analyst, I like to go to it because you have a lot of people blogging and throwing a lot of interesting stuff up. Not a lot of it makes sense to me. Some of it really makes sense. But they do studies. So they're very grassroots study. They found that 80% of organizations experienced a security incident in 2015. Only 29% of these companies had a cybersecurity expert working in their IT department. Even one cybersecurity person. This is why I say that companies are really struggling to make this, this sort of leap over to cybersecurity from information security. Again, because information security for so many years at so many companies, so many unregulated industries, were just very skeleton staffs. Next point, only 7% have a cybersecurity expert on their executive team. So where is the board? Where are the leaders of the company, the people creating the strategy, getting any information about cybersecurity? 55% said their businesses didn't have regular access to any IT security experts at all, internal or third party, with the majority of companies also reporting they had no plans to hire or contract one within the next year. Does this make any sense to you? So who's going to do security? Again, it's going to fall on a lot of new faces, new people in their jobs. This is an interesting study too, RSA, ISACA, so it has a little bit of some respectability to it, a little bit of research depth to it. 52% of global cybersecurity and IT managers and practitioners said less than a quarter of applicants for cybersec positions have the necessary skills. I believe that. A tick more said it would take 3 to 6 months just to find qualified candidates. So what this is that if you can't find the people you need, what do? You have to develop them internally. How is training development going at your company? Okay? Well, the good news is I've seen a lot of companies who are really terrible at training and development. They're doing it really well right now because they're in industries where if they don't find these people, they're not competitive. And again, they will be acquired or there'll be a merger, and they don't want to. They're aggressively figuring out how to do training and development. So I'm very pleased to say that this whole idea of 7 out of every $10 spent on training wasted, it's not so true anymore. Companies have started to realize, and they did that years ago, when they just couldn't find people, saying, it's not a matter of how much money we have, it's a matter of where we spend it. And they also found that it's better to develop people internally too, because these are people who can work in the culture and understand how things work. Sometimes, often a straight line is not how you get to the end. It's you meander around. The culture forces you to meander around. So I think a lot of companies, particularly in big data, they hired people out of Google and LinkedIn, Facebook, flat organizational cultures, not so siloed, put it that way. And it didn't work out. These people at these companies could not do what they did at their former employer at their new employer. They just couldn't do it. The culture was... What really killed big data, although it's come back, is that companies were not used to sharing. They weren't used to transparency. A lot of these tech companies, these software firms and these online firms, they have a lot of transparency. Anybody can have an idea and it can become a product. Anybody. Try doing that at companies that are 50 years or 70 years older. It's really difficult to get an idea at the top. It's really hierarchical, and big data is really a horizontal kind of thing, in my opinion. It's more of a this way than a that way. And if it's that way, it's going to be really difficult to be able to deal with all that massive data you've got and make any sense out of it. It can be done, but it's just much more difficult. Okay, let me just go through a couple more cybersecurity trends just to give you, again, workforce trends. Demand for cybersecurity professionals is growing 3.5 times faster than the overall IT job market. Tough. Projected shortfall of 1.5 million cybersecurity professionals by 2019. Right now, it's estimated by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which we monitor. They say there's about 210,000 cybersecurity jobs currently unfilled. I guarantee you it's probably three or four times that, but at least these are official numbers. U.S. News & World Report ranked information security analysis 8th on its list of 100 best jobs. Rand Corporation, this is an incredible thing, what I'm reading here. Only 1,000 top-level cybersecurity experts in the world. Out of 7 billion people, only 1,000 top level. And where do you suppose they all work? Governments, most likely. But it's sad. But again, I bring this up because it's a really important thing for companies to grasp and to think through, well, then who's going to do security? I mean, who's going to do it? What are all the parts of all the people here in order to put together security solutions? I think everyone's going to do it. But again, I think you're in for a very rude awakening here, in this room, of what you're probably going to be asked to do over the next 5 years, progressively more and more. You're not going to be asked to do less of it, but they're going to talk to you about it. All right. Machine-to-machine connections, about 40% of all global devices and connections right now. That's the chart on the left. Very interesting. In terms of IP traffic and devices, it's pretty even between TVs, PCs, smartphones. This gives you, again, an indication of what platforms are most important. I don't think there's anything here that you would debate. I think it's pretty much split between all the different devices that we have, mobile devices. I don't see that changing. But the fact that machine to machine, 43%, that's big. Global connections. And by the way, pace of change. How many years did it take for the radio to be adopted by 50 million people? Take a guess. Before 50 million people were listening to the radio. How many years? 38. How long did it take Facebook to get 50 million people signed up? Yeah, 1 year. How many months did it take for Twitter to get to 50 million? 9 months. Amazing how quickly things are happening right now. I want to talk about global because I think this impacts you too. The fact that you're going to be You're already doing it, but you're going to be writing code and creating products that are truly global. You're going to have to accommodate people of different languages, different customs, different practices consistently. And so what I did is circled a couple of these just to give you an idea, and I won't go over them and read them to you. But when you get a hold of this presentation, look at this slide, because it just means that your job is going to be more complicated. I think it already is. I think many of you are obviously writing, working on a global scale, particularly if you're working in a Microsoft environment. But if you're not, you probably will. It's a great opportunity for you not to become more deeper in the skills that you have, but realize, and you'll be hearing this from me again, realize that really you should be spending as much or more time developing your soft skills. You've heard this before, incredibly important. Developing your global skills, again, as an engineer or programmer. And there's the numbers right there. What I skipped over before was urbanization. I don't know if this is so germane to this group, but the fact that every year 65 million more people are moving into cities. It's got to have some impact on the technology, but it's amazing. It's just the acceleration of change. So the digital evolution, I want you to look at the lower left or the lower right individuals, that these are changing how business is done across borders. For individuals, it's new ways to work, new ways to learn, new ways to communicate across borders. This is all software driven. You also see with large multinational startups, small to medium size companies, this has a huge impact on anyone doing business, anybody creating products, anybody testing products, hardware, software, middleware. I mean, it's undeniable. This is an interesting chart because the question was the most significant challenges to meeting priorities for digital programs. Look at those. Just call your attention. Lack of leadership, inability to keep pace with the faster speed of business under digital. Do it faster. If you make mistakes, back up real quick, do it again, keep going. It's like a shark, just keep moving forward, keep moving forward. Inability to adopt an experimentation mindset that is key for best practices. And at the bottom, organizational structure. I think companies are starting to understand the organizational structure part, because I meet more and more companies now that have created digital innovation groups. They're usually not part of IT. They're on their own. They may take people from IT, but they figured out that this has to be a department that sits in the business, in a line of business or in a corporate department, and they need to be left alone to do their stuff, because they are creating the future of the company. These companies are they're betting their money on these digital groups as being something that they need now, but they're really going to need 5 to 10 years from now. These people make a lot of money. A director-level person running a digital innovation group, on average, is making a base salary of about $225,000 a year. This is probably a person who's about 30 years old. Their cash bonus, their target is 50%, and they want them to make that 50% of base. The LTI, the long-term incentives, which is basically stock, they usually get about 3/4, what would be the value of about 3/4 of their base pay in stock. If that person meets all of their numbers, they're making almost $500,000 a year. Just think about that. Somewhere between $450,000, $425,000, $475,000 a year. 30 years old, 31 years old. Just think of the pressure on that person. They probably, are making. It's not the money that drives them. It's something else, but it's the money that rewards them, keeps them in the company, keeps them going. Unemployment, what I like about this chart is that the problem we're having in this country right now with unemployed people not being able to find jobs, it's happening everywhere. And many of you who are currently employed may feel overqualified or underutilized. I mean, it's very difficult now to find a person who is 100% satisfied in their job, who works in technology, even if they're gainfully employed. They often say, I wish I were working over there doing that. I hear a lot of complaints. I very rarely meet somebody who's really got it wired. So don't feel bad if you're basically happy, but you could do better. Because I'm telling you, as part of my advice here, that you probably need to start looking for a job somewhere else. It's a tough thing to call, but there's this thing called salary compression, which if you're in the compensation world, does anybody know what salary compression is? Yeah. What it means that that job is growing faster in the marketplace in terms of pay, value, than the annual increases you're getting at your company.
That's not my definition.
Well, that's in compensation, it is. What's your definition?
My definition is if you don't quit, the people in charge won't give you a raise.
Well, I'm saying the same thing. You're making less money than you would if you put yourself in the market, because the market is valuing you higher. So why don't people?
It's not the market, it's management.
Well, the management at another company might value you more than the management at your company.
Well, the way I look at it is management in the current company doesn't value you enough.
Well, that's what same thing. We're talking about the same thing.
Is invalid.
Okay, so the company you're working for is underpaying you. Do we agree on that? The company you're working for is undervaluing you.
So how do you figure out what company you're going to?
Did you hear that?
Have the same problem, but they have an emergency, so the spreadsheet got an exception for this one.
I disagree with you because I work with companies that have very little salary compression. They have worked very, very hard at keeping their salaries at market levels. Believe me, they do it. And if they don't do it.
How do you identify those companies from the outside?
Oh, you mean if you're a candidate?
Yeah.
That's a good question. How do you identify a company that's a high payer, that's willing to pay you more? Where do you go? Do you go to Glassdoor?
It's not willing to pay you more, it's understanding your value.
Okay. Where do you go to find out whether there's a company out there that will respect you and understand your value? Where do you guys go right now? Any hands? A new company. Where do you find that? Do you do it through networking at conferences? Does that work? Is there a website that you can go to get that information? You go to a recruiter? It's interesting. A lot of people come to me because they know that we know how much 3,000 companies are paying people. So they come to me and they say, where can I go in these geographical areas that will pay me more? And I'm not a recruiter and I can't tell them, but I know the answer to it. But it's confidential information. I can't really be in my business and go anywhere near compromising the confidential data that people give me. But I usually try to give them a little nudge in a direction because I do know employers that probably would pay them. But what I say is, there's a couple of really good recruiters around. If I know one, I'll tell them to go to so-and-so because I know that person knows the answer. So that's what I do. But it is an interesting place. Where do you go to find that next opportunity? That's a great question. Thanks for bringing it up. It is. That's not the only question. Because a lot of companies, don't forget, a lot of companies will entice you by saying you're going to be on this project, and then 9 months later they bring you in, and then the next project they put you on is a horrible one. I mean, they just, I think that's maybe what you're talking about too, is they just, it's difficult. But, those of us who have been married and been through relationships, we know this. You got to sell something, Okay. So there's this new gig economy. How many of you are independent? You do not. You work for yourself. It's very, very few. But this gig economy is interesting because people that are working where their primary income is coming from consulting or contracting or something like that, it's a pretty big number. It's 44% of the people out there. 20 to 30% of the working age population in the US and the European Union, 15. That's a lot of people engaged in independent work. I'm sure some of you are doing it because you lost your job along the way, or you got angry and left your company. It is very, very lucrative to go out and work as a consultant. I think many people struggle with all kinds of things at home. People get sick. They go through divorces. They go through changes in life, and it's a lifestyle issue. But I think one of the reasons we have such an unemployed population out there in the world is that companies are not hiring. They're just not hiring full-timers because it's expensive and they need an agile workforce. They need somebody to come in and get this work done. I mean, they never really talk to me about, I got to hire people, I need to get this work done. They say to me, I need more of these kinds of skills. And the decision is, do I hire a contractor, do I hire a contractor, do I hire a consultant, do I hire a full-time worker? And they usually don't go to the full-time because they've already been trained to know that it's going to take a long time to find that person. We need to get this project done. We'll hire a consultant, and maybe we'll convert them. So I think a lot of people know that that's how companies work. And I know so many people in my line of work who are independents, and the number gets bigger and bigger and bigger. When I started this company 20 years ago, I didn't meet too many people who were independents, but now it seems to be a big chunk of the workforce. And it's not really a bad thing, actually. And so these are what I call, the definitions of this gig economy. There are some people that are working again supplementally. They're just supplementing their income. And I would put basically Uber drivers in there too, I mean, most Uber drivers, except the ones in the big cities, any big city Uber driver probably can't make money because of the taxation. I mean, to be an Uber driver in New York City, it costs so much money. I mean, you're $5,000 up front. You have to pay insurance on your car. You have to pay 10% to the city and 20% to Uber. So how can you be a part-time Uber driver in New York City or Chicago? But most Uber drivers that I meet who are not in big cities do have a main job, and they're just moonlighting. And they would be part of this gig economy right here. Okay, so here's the hard reality. We have to manage people under some really difficult conditions, and the workforce chaos is really everywhere. So before we get into numbers, I just want to take you through some breakdowns that we see. Because again, this is your management, and this is also you, if you're a manager, dealing with your HR department. You know where the breakdowns are, and this is going to be familiar to you, some of this. First of all, we hear from companies all the time, we've never had retention issues, and all of a sudden we just lost about 10 of our very best people. They just were gone. We couldn't even fight back. Maybe compression, but I'm thinking that they had more breakdowns than that. Go ahead.
So something really bad happened in the economy like 8 years ago.
Okay.
And a lot of people have been kind of stuck.
Yep.
Because of lack of opportunity.
Yep.
And if you look at some big legacy companies, there's a lot of people there who have been very unhappy for a long time. And now if the economy starts taking off and the H-1B visa problem gets addressed as supposedly has been promised, some of these big companies, they're going to lose a lot of people to other opportunities.
So what we're
So
what they're saying is, yeah, companies may lose a lot of H-1B people. There are a lot of people who are very unhappy who lost their jobs in the recession, but were able to get work in consulting firms. They're just gone.
their jobs at a big company,
Yeah,
and they stay there
right,
even though they've been mistreated.
right.
And part of the lack of opportunity was due to H-1B visa abuse in our business. And if that abuse stops, then there'll even be more opportunity than what you're talking about.
Okay.
And so there'll be even more opportunity. And then what will happen is some of those big companies are going to find they're going to lose a significant percentage of the good people that are there because there wasn't enough opportunity elsewhere.
But I'm going to tell you this, the percent of people, the number of people on H-1B visas, if you look at the entire technology workforce, is very small.
But if you look at some companies, they've abused them.
Right. Well, I'm not arguing. Some companies do abuse them, but that H-1B issue is just a small portion of all of the people who work in the technology workforce, which is a big workforce. It's a very, very small percent, but it's a vocal percent. And we're asked to come in as expert witnesses, too, on H-1B things, so I understand that issue. But in general, if you look at most companies, I think you see this happening to them. So they are under the gun just at a time when they need to up their game. They're stuck in the mud. That's one of the reasons I think we're still in business after 20 years. I never thought my company would go past 5 to 7 years. We're still in business because of that. It's gotten worse. Now, the multidimensional workers are really interesting. The comment I made before about don't necessarily go out and get another certification or get a deeper technical skill. Go deeper in that. And that's because of this. This is what employers want. They want software developers. They want software engineers. They want programmers. But they want a different kind. They want people. And this is just a smattering of the things I hear all the time when I'm saying, other than technology, or including technology, what's your priority list on your next hires? I hear it in security all the time. People, no, I want people with marketing skills. I don't need more depth, technology depth in my security people. I'm good. I need them to help make the sales pitch that I'm making at the board level. I need to have everybody below me at that level and that level and that level make the same pitch. We have to sell security to an essentially non-technical group of people. How do you do that? That's one of the ways that CISOs are building strong security departments, bringing in a lot of interesting skills, collaboration skills, language skills, flexibility, creativity, all that stuff. They're looking for, and I know this is like a platitude, right? Soft skills, yeah, we value soft skills. But right now, with developers and engineers, it's really important. For a lot of the reasons I've already spoken about, and I'll address a few more as we get into the presentation. But they're looking for you to be able to, it used to be that you started out as a programmer and you were just straight coder, right? Straight coder. Then you became a programmer analyst because you started taking on more of a sort of a strategic look at your job. They asked you to understand a little more about the environment and the product and the industry and the people. And then you went from there to software engineer, and then maybe senior, and then lead. And guess what the most common path is for architects? It's software engineers right now. That's one of the most common paths for architects. Because by the time you get to be like a lead or principal software engineer, nobody's handing specs to you. You're developing those requirements for the job. You know these people, not only what they need now, but you also know what these consumers are probably going to want 2 or 3 years from now. And I think part of the reason these people who have become really successful software engineers that I meet is because they have a lot of these skills. They're people. They can talk to anybody. They collect information. It's not a barrier for them to be able to go out into their customer base, to go into into the business side. People want to work with them on teams. They trust them. It's, I guess, in a way, you're talking about trust. There's a whole presentation I saw recently given to a bunch of chief information security officers, and the whole thing, it was a leadership talk, and it was brilliant, and it was all about trust, saying you need to understand that your ability to get along in your career, to get higher in your career, will be people need to trust you. And security is about trust, and it's a little more than that, but they brought up a lot of interesting writing on it and stuff I'd never heard of, and a lot of the CISOs in the room saying, that's it, that's exactly it. I've got to get to know my audience better. I have to develop more of a relationship with them. Other breakdowns, seller compression. There it is, balancing pay for new hires with pay for long-timers. Most companies have really an inability to forecast labor. Again, that's one of the reasons why we do what we do. We forecast about 2 to 3 years down the road, but we were really good at forecasting in the next year, particularly skills, hot skills. Every 6 months, we publish our hot list forecast. So we're tracking pay for 880 skills and certifications, and then every 6 months, we decide these are the ones that are going to go up in value over the next 6 to 9 months. We've been publishing this every 6 months since the beginning of 2007, and we've got it right 92% of the time. It's easy to do that with skills because, again, skills are different than jobs. Skills can move very, very quickly. They're driven by all kinds of elements of demand. But what we usually do is we try to guess what the adoption rate will be on a fairly large scale, and we look at it by industry, look at it by country. We look at it by size of company in particular, small, medium, large, SMBs, large companies. How many of you work in management roles in your company? Is there anyone who didn't want to work in that management role or just wanted to keep working, just keep going as a technology guru, but there was no place for you to go? Yeah, that's one of the things that companies, they've sort of solved that problem, or a lot of companies we work with now, when you get to management, you can go into management of people or management of process. The processor, you pretty much you keep doing what you're doing, become an individual contributor in your area. The managers do that, exactly that. They go into a track where they're managing people, which is from a training and development point of view, a whole different set of skills. A lot of companies still have that problem, and you lose some of the really best people because there's no place for them to go in the company. And that is a breakdown. Here's the volatility in the marketplace. So we're going to start getting into numbers now. So we track, again, market values of skills. Now, when I say market value, these are companies are willing to pay people usually it's expressed as an equivalent percent of their salary. So we'll give you an extra 5%, extra 7%, extra 12%. Sometimes they give you a lump sum, but we report it as a percent of base pay. So you're going to be seeing some numbers, and it's the equivalent of percent of base pay. So this goes back to 2007. Blue line are non-certified skills. There might be a certification for them, but that's not, they're being hired for a non-certified skill. The red line are certifications, and the green line is the combination of both. So when I say volatility, I mean we're reporting every 90 days. Now, salaries are not going to change that much for a position over 90 days, but skills do. Volatility is the percent of 880 skills certifications that actually change in value in something as short as 90 days. And so volatility to us, and that's a very important number for us because we want to know not just overall volatility, but which areas are moving. Is it applications development? Is it database? Is it security? Is it systems? Is it networking? It tells me as an analyst a lot more than salaries. So here we go. Now, I put this up because tell me what's wrong with this slide. See anything wrong with this slide?
Web development's pretty low.
I'm sorry?
Web development seems low.
Okay. This was just published by Computer World about 2 weeks ago. Well, it's over 100% because they say if you plan to hire, and they're just saying 35% of the people say they plan to hire programmers, and 65% said they did not plan to hire over the next 12 months, so it doesn't have to add up to 100. Let me tell you what I think is wrong with this slide. What's wrong with the slide are only 57 people responded. 57 people answered an email and responded. Who are these people? That's what's wrong with this slide. So what happens is this, and this is another reason why I'm in business. There's so much awful information out there about pay. It comes from recruiting firms. It comes from Dice. Dice decides to do keyword searches, and the higher you are, the more times you have to be mentioned. This skill has to be mentioned more than 1,000 times. But they do lists of top 10 skills based on how many times it's mentioned on their job boards. If you go to any job board and you look at who's posting jobs, it's mainly consulting firms. It's mainly consulting firms. So it's actually really a good sample, nor do I think just mentioning it is enough to give something juice in the marketplace or heat. And let me show you one more. And that's why I bring my data to you. I'm going to explain to you how we do our numbers and why I'm still in business, because people do not want to live without accuracy in numbers, and we're just the only company that's been producing this level of accuracy. So hiring slows down. So now this is 196 respondents, but it's saying that 29% believe that in 2017 headcount will go down or will increase, 15% decrease, 56% stay the same. Interesting chart, but let's talk about this data. So how do we get our numbers? Research to me is when you get a group of companies, a large group of companies that represent a good demographic for a marketplace. Like, what is the demographic for tech professionals? Is it different in Portland than it is in New York City? Yes. Is it different in Kansas City than it is in Saskatchewan or Winnipeg, Manitoba? Yes. So every local labor market has its own demographics for IT professionals. Okay. Certainly Silicon Valley has a different demographic than Racine, Wisconsin, most likely. Okay. So what we do is we're in 83 cities in US and Canada, and we made it our business to get the most important employers in that city involved in giving us their compensation data. And right now we're tracking almost 256,000 people, more than 40 industries, and they update every 2 weeks. So we're getting fresh data from a sample that we created because we think this is the best sample in that city. And that it changes all the time. The recessions and mergers and acquisitions change labor markets all the time. Anybody from Charlotte here? From the Charlotte, North Carolina market? Interesting market. So that market for many years was, let me see, NASCAR Hall of Fame is there. It's mainly B of A data centers, right? And then they made a lot of acquisitions after this last, and Lowe's is there too. I mean, it's very quiet, just humming along. All of a sudden, Amazon puts an office there, Microsoft puts an office there, and Google puts an office there. And all of a sudden, all these people that have never had problems with retention all started losing their best people to Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. This is what happens. It happens quickly, too. So we're always monitoring that, and we're always trying to create alerts for people and telling them. So one of the reasons that people give us data is we're willing to give them back a lot of stuff for free, like alerts, like analysis of the industry. If they want, you know, an hour briefing by a senior person, and they don't have a contract with the company, you know, with Gartner or somebody, we'll do it for free. I'll literally say, I'm so happy to get your data. I'll be on the phone. I'll handle it myself or one of my senior people. And so we have a pretty good and steady and happy group of research people. In fact, usually we have to turn people away now because they've heard this is a great deal. All you have to do is give them compensation data, and you know they will give you market intelligence, and it's really good stuff. But the thing we also do is compensation is only 30% of what we do. We're looking at every issue that has to do with the IT labor market, which isn't just pay. It's supply and demand of skills. It's things like how do you expand an architect group from 10 people to 55 architects? How do you do that? How do you build a digital workforce? I mean, what do you need to do to build this capability in a company? So, you know, we help them with just about everything you can imagine, but it's really important for us, particularly, to get skills pay. Because skills pay, as I said, because of the volatility and the movement in the market, it tells us a lot about what's happening in the marketplace, what just happened, but what's going to happen in the marketplace, because we combine it with a lot of information we have about strategy and about relationships that companies have, where they're going, how industries are developing, how technology is being adopted or not being adopted, who's doing things well, what is it about what they did that made it work so well, is this something that could happen in a different industry? Because a lot of things that you can do in this, you know, in one industry are not applicable to another industry. Some of the great HR programs are at companies like Accenture, but you can't do what Accenture does, you know, because you know they're in a different industry than you. Okay, so these are the cities that we're in. So you're going to be seeing data that covers the Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities. Okay, just flash that up real quickly. Tier 1 tend to be larger metropolitan areas. Tier 2 are smaller metropolitan areas. So we're going to look at this data from this report here. It's the pay index that we have. It's about 70,000. We've verified about 70,000. The pay premiums being earned by about 70,000 people. I think I've talked about all the rest here. It's been around since 1999. It's been updated every 90 days since 1999 in this sample. We pretty much segment because we want to look at, again, how sort of categories, common categories in technology, how those are moving against each other. So with non-certified, it's apps, tools and platforms, it's database messaging, you know, it's stuff that you would expect. SAP and a whole bunch of other enterprise business applications. Certifications are a little different Because again, what is true about certification? Certifications really is an industry that was created by vendors to be able to sell and resell their products. So many of these certifications are in networking, systems, and security. There aren't nearly as the number of certifications in applications development as you would find in non-certified. Is there a certification for Python or Java FX? I don't know of one. There's so many skills that just don't have certifications. There's no dominant vendor. It could be open source. So we have many more non-certified skills. And this is how they've moved going back to 2000. This is a 16-year-old chart. Now, the blue line is the average pay for an IT certification. Again, you're getting paid something in addition to your salary, and it's guaranteed. So something really happened in 2007. What would that be? But certifications were already on a downward trend starting in 2006. That's when the lines crossed. What's interesting is that certifications have been gaining more value. The gains have been greater than, on average, than non-certified skills going back to 2013. And why do you suppose that's true? Anyone want to guess why all of a sudden are certifications getting this kind of respect? Security, okay. Anything else? Cloud. All of a sudden, out of nowhere came all these cloud certifications. There must be like 40 of them right now. So all of a sudden, we had certifications in areas we've never had before. A whole new category. I think it's probably security and probably cloud. And now sort of big data is sort of coming in, so database, data management. But you can see that there's been real growth in there. So that's the only point I want to make about that. Let's talk about this chart. These are certifications. Now, this one goes back to 2004. What I did is I segmented. So as you see there, let me just take it over here. See if I can. I don't think it'll reach that far. Sorry about that. So what this is this is just a category chart. So architecture, project management, and process skills are the highest paying skills. The reason why is because they do have prerequisites. They're harder to get. Some of these architecture and project management certifications are peer review. You can take a test, you can do a lab, but you literally have to go before your peers, and they decide whether you know it or not. And you may fail that peer review. So those are harder to get. They're more expensive to get. People earn more money. There are beginner and intermediate certifications in these areas, to be sure. But generally speaking, they make more money because they're harder to get. But what's interesting is right there. Greatest growth in the last 2 years has been in, to your point there, information security certifications. As a group, almost 11% growth in the last 2 years. But applications development is not doing too bad there at the bottom right there. And here are the numbers here. So applications development certifications, up about 8% in 2 years. They're up 5% in the last year. That's not bad. It's not bad at all. But look at information security, up almost 11% in the last year and 15% in the last 2 years. It's getting a lot more respect. But what's interesting is if you look at those numbers, applications development really would come in second. So, again, so I think this is part of, we'll look at the tables so you can see what's behind some of that stuff. Now here are the non-certified, and this is even more interesting because right now the greatest growth was in applications development tools and platforms. 13% growth over 2 years in non-certified. See? There are so many more non-certified skills, even the ones that we don't cover. It's a huge number. Companies don't care whether you've been certified or not. They want to know if you can do it. Can you do that with these people in this industry, on this platform, with this software? Can you do that? Or this hardware? Some of you, of course, hire people. You want them, you have a way of determining how good they are at what they do, how they answer their questions. You may have them do some coding. You take them through your projects. You talk to people who recommended they come to work at your company. They've worked with them. They vouch for them. And again, it's not just the ability to do aptitude in a technical area. It's all that other stuff. It's all that soft stuff. It's all that Swiss Army knife stuff. I think that is why that line is at 13% growth over 2 years. And there's the numbers right there. Database, slightly more. The only reason operating systems has had that growth over 2 years, what do you suppose that is? Because of smartphones. It's because of the mobile, the smartphone platform. Created a lot of demand. And tablets, too. Okay, so now the first thing I want to do before I start showing you lists of non-certified skills is I want to show you this. Can anyone not read this? Because there was a lot of data here. These are the highest paying skills right now. I have them in numbers because I think the top data architecture was on average paying something like 18 to 19% of a skills premium. So I had them in groups. And generally speaking, what would differentiate these groups would be maybe the equivalent of 1% of base salary. That's how they're grouped. So let's just take a look at this for a second. Anything jump out at you? You see a lot of big data on this chart at the top. Governance, architecture, prescriptive analytics. Right, complex event processing, big data analytics, but then you also see DevOps in there, machine learning, microservices. So, I would say it's a mix of some security, architecture, and then some programming, application development stuff. A lot of the application development stuff you start seeing in numbers 6, 7, 8, 9. But still, to make this list, generally speaking, you have to be somewhere above maybe on average 12% as a skills premium, even to make this list. Now, if it's green, it means that it went up. It actually rose in value from 3 months ago. If it's in red, it said it lost value from 3 months ago. And if it's in amber, it means it's new to the list. We just added it. We add about 100 skills and certifications to our index every year. So every quarter, we're adding more and more and more. And so that's what that means. Okay, so Microsoft skills pay. And by the way, that chart is in this publication. So if you go home with this publication, you've got this chart. So what I did was I did it in alphabetical order. Now, I'll point out to you that some of these skills have certifications too. But again, these are employers who are willing to pay without a certification, just for having that skill. What jumps out at me in this chart is the very bottom, that there's been growth. There was a lot of growth in the last 6 months, which would be from April, May, June, July, August, September. That's 5% growth. Less growth, and most of that seemed to come in the middle 6 months of the year, because only less than 1% growth from July to October, June, July, September. So that's very interesting. So right now, in the last 6 months, Microsoft skills, there's been a little bump in the market, which is interesting. Which of these skills do you think went up in value? Any guesses over the last 6 months? What's really hot on this list? I know, from this list, like you said cloud, so that would be Azure. Maybe went up. Anybody for SharePoint? It's a lot of push. One of the reasons why these go up too, and we factor this in, is that if it's a vendor, basically a vendor skill or certification, we look to see what the marketing budget or what kind of marketing push the vendor gave that. Because we want to know that they put a lot of money and a lot of attention into flooding the market with the media with that particular skill and certification. That means that can move a needle. That's why we love to do analysis on non-certified skills that are vendor independent, because there was no vendor pushing them. They grew organically. But a vendor really, really can move the needle on these. And are very successful, particularly around their certifications. But I don't know offhand which of these, other than probably, there's a couple here I think that got some media push over the last, in 2016. So you want to move on to the next chart. We're going to look at certifications. So we've had a lot of certifications, Microsoft, over the years, but Microsoft has a way of always retiring. They're always churning their certifications. So I'd say that we have at least this many, and probably more, that have been retired, that we've covered in the past. This is our current list. What's interesting is those certifications as a group have been going down in value. It's interesting. Non-certified Microsoft skills going up in value, certified skills going down. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to why that might be happening? Okay, so the market's changing, and what about certifications? Okay. We have an analyst in the group. Yeah. Sometimes the market moves, and it's difficult to react to it. There's a lag time a lot of times. So whatever happened to drive that down could have happened 6 months ago. It could have been probably 6 or 9 months ago. An event happened in the market. Usually there's a lag of 6 to 9 months. So we always look at kind of what was happening a year ago. I mean, that could have been, suddenly brought some of these numbers down. Any comments on this chart? Because we're going to go through this, a few more of these, and then we're going to look at salaries. Again, so you can get this information in here. These are application development tools and platform skills. And what I did here is I wanted to show these to you, but I wanted to put in red some of the ones that I think, for whatever reason, there's some juice in them right now. It could be there are trends supporting growth in some of these. It may not be growth that happened in the last 3 months. But we hear about these a lot. People looking for Spark, looking for more Hadoop, looking for people with more and more people with agile skills. C#, wow, Cognos. Any comments on this? Now there's going to be 3 more. They're in alphabetical order. So these are just the A's through C's. Okay, now here's C through O. Again, red would be, GitHub. I mean, if you're able to write software that can, and you're pointing it in the direction of Git or GitHub, some open source, that's valuable, obviously. And as you'll see in a slide farther in the presentation, that one of the things you've got to understand is that is a real saleable point for all of you. The more fluent you are with open systems, anything, just the more valuable you'll be to more people. You're just increasing your opportunities. I'm sure you already know that. So I put Azure on this as well. And then here's the very last chart with AD tools and platforms. Our language, Ruby on Rails, Scala. Scala really popular. Really, really popular. Everybody wants Scala. And it's paying between 10 and 15%. 13% is a hell of a number to be paid for one skill. And just think about that. They're willing to pay you another 13% on average of your base pay for that skill because they value that. And again, they're trying to differentiate you from people who don't have that skill. They're also trying to send a message to people that, hey, if you want to be if you want to be more useful to our company, these are the skills that we're willing to pay more for some people. Sometimes they tie this to projects, to certain people. Again, they pay skills, pay to people they want to keep, not to everybody. They don't want to feel that everybody who earns a certain certification is automatically will get a skills premium. What these are about are correcting, as I mentioned before, problems with the structure of pay in their company. They just have no way of figuring out how to pay this person. They can't do it through salary. I think skills pay is basically a strategy in most companies to not lose more people. To be able to go to a CFO or go to a senior vice president or whoever you have to go to argue not to lose this person, we're going to give them another 10%. And we're going to tie it to a skill that they have, which is exactly what that company wants, and we need it too. So they'll tie it to a skill and make an argument. They'll say, we got this from a reputable survey, like we do all of our salary surveys, so it comes from a good source. We didn't pull it off of salary.com or some internet website. It's a real number, and we think that the combination of their salary and that skills premium is pretty much going to match what that company wants to take that person is paying them in total cash. It's just that we pay them a lower salary, they pay them a higher salary. We pay them a skills premium. They're not paying them any bonus, or it could be a different comp philosophy. And that's what this is all about in the comp world, is that every company has its own philosophy. Some pay liberal bonuses and at or below market pay salaries. Some companies, their comp philosophy is to pay above market. That's just it. How do you, do you have the agility and the flexibility in your compensation systems to be able to handle all that? Most companies don't. Okay, so web and e-commerce. What I want to point out here is Angular, JS, Django, Docker, and JavaScript. Huge for all of you people. There's a few more in here too, but I like those ones on this list. On this list, SharePoint, Node.js, mobile applications development, very strong. Again, probably a few more on this list. I don't know why Microsoft Commerce Server. Anybody want to tell me why Microsoft Commerce Server should be up at paying on average 11%? Stunning to me. It could be that the supply of talent has gotten smaller, and some companies have. Yeah. Okay. So you'll get a copy of this if you leave me a card. If you leave me a card, I'll send you the presentation. So you'll have big data in here. You'll have cloud skills, and you'll have database. So I put a little bit in there. Certifications, again, you can look at this list, the list of the highest paying. Again, very interesting. If you look at this group, it's heavily security and architecture. It's mostly security and architecture. Virtually every one of them in the first, second, third, and fourth category, and I would say getting into the fifth category are in security. And that's, again, because certifications segment very heavily infrastructure and not, say, applications development. And so you would expect that here. You would expect a lot of network, Cisco's. You would expect a number of vendors, hardware vendors and middleware vendors and security. Okay, so when you get this, again, you'll have the data for programming languages. I put them all in there. Big data. I didn't identify here the really hot ones. Cloud is in here too. And now to salaries. Now let me tell you how to read these charts. Okay. 65 cities in the US. You've seen the cities, I showed you a list. What you're seeing here is when I say 10th, 25th, 50th, 75th, 90th percentile, you all know what that means. If you had 100 people in a sample, the 10th percentile is the person at number 10, ranked. The person at number 10 is 10th percentile. The person in the 25th position, ranked bottom to top, would be 25th. The person at the 90th, there's only 10 people above them is the percentile. You also have an average. I put in the national highest and lowest out of 65 cities. The highest tends to be New York, San Jose, San Francisco, often are at the top. They were usually pretty high. At the bottom, again, it's different for every job, but at the bottom you tend to see Oklahoma City, Louisville, Kentucky, I think, maybe a couple that tend to be on the bottom. Again, these are .NET. I know that we have .NET developers here. I'd like comments. And you're looking at bonuses, too, on a national basis. the actual cash bonus these people are making, and total cash, which would be salary plus bonus. Quick comments.
You say with that salary, that's including a bonus or not?
No, that's base salary, no bonus. It could include skills pay, though. I mean, some companies do put skills pay into bonus, but not many. And the reason why is because they know that there's such volatility that they risk, if you put it in salary, they risk overpaying that person a year down the road if that skill goes down in value. Yeah, go ahead.
You have a chart for developers that do things in the open source Linux environment. You know, in the previous charts, you had things like Python and R, Django.
Have you ever seen a salary survey that had open source?
Well, no, but specific things like you have .NET this, .NET that, because there's a lot of people in Microsoft that's kind of made it possible to do something like
That's where skills pay comes in. We haven't managed to isolate open source yet because we don't have enough companies that have defined the position specifically as open source. What they've done is they've taken an engineer or a developer, an analyst, and they've actually added a skills premium for some open source tool or platform or something they've added to it. They may actually put that into base pay, but the only way that you can actually come up with a salary for something is you have to have people all around the country, at least in our 65 cities, who can identify with a job description that we show them and matches a person to that job description. And in open source, it's been very difficult. It hasn't yet codified into jobs, but it's very much codified into skills that.
Another possible explanation is that in that particular universe, the percentage of consultants who do the work is probably very high.
True. But we also cover consultants in our salaries, but they have to be working for a consulting firm. Salaried. They have to be a salaried person in a consulting firm. And not even consulting firms can show you job descriptions for 100% open source people. They just don't exist. That's not how they do it. Well, I'm talking about salaries have to be, the rigor of salaries are you have to develop a description that is universally accepted for that job. Whether they call them that or not, that's what that person does, and it doesn't exist. Okay, so again, we have Java developers in this, and we're sort of running out of time, so let me just take you through what's in these numbers, because the point of this was just to show you a few of these, and then being able to provide this presentation to you so you can look at them in more detail later. So what I'm giving you is Java developers. I'm giving you mobile application developers, manager, senior, and mobile. Giving you, that should be UX. UX, UI designers, very popular. Giving you Scrum Masters, senior and mid-level. Giving you cloud developers, senior and mid-level. Giving you DevOps developers. By the way, it took a long time for us. We just introduced DevOps developers this year because DevOps was something that was very slow in being adopted, but now it actually exists as a bona fide title. We covered DevOps, much like cloud, simply through, is the person an analyst, an architect, an engineer, a developer, and if they have DevOps, we would apply a DevOps premium to it. But see, then that's how we covered .NET. For many years, there was no such thing as a .NET developer in any salary survey until the job gains acceptance, and all of a sudden, people are hiring to a .NET spec that is codified in the marketplace. It's now happened with DevOps, and this is just this year that we started covering 3 levels of DevOps developers. Database developers, 3 levels of those. Data warehouse business intelligence developers, senior and mid-level. You'll have this. Web developers. A lot of interesting activity lately in web developers. That job is going through a bit of a transition right now. And business applications development. These are very high-priced jobs because it's sort of It's sort of where we put people, again, where they're doing business apps, but they don't fit in anywhere else. A lot of companies like to keep very broad, not generic, but very broad definitions to put a lot of very highly skilled individual contributors who happen to be software engineers and developers. So we have a category of, at the top, VP, business applications and corporate applications. Then we have manager, senior, and mid-level developer. We have application systems architects. I put this one in because I don't think you really can talk about a universe of application development jobs without talking about the application architects. And I would guess that probably we have some application architects coming to this conference. I meet them at most conferences right now. So I'm giving you 4 levels of application systems architects. Now, what I want to do here is I wanted to talk to you before we close out here. I introduced this idea that technology, that tech workforce chaos was everywhere. It's a real problem that you're dealing with if you're a manager and trying to hire people, but we deal with it with HR departments and business departments all the time. We discovered that there's a way out of this. We tried everything. It's very difficult to get a company who is so deep in the chaos that they haven't really changed their HR systems and the way they pay people, except for little workaround solutions. Really haven't changed them in 10 or 15 years. And this is very common that companies, they'll have job descriptions that have never changed in 10 years. They don't even know what these people are doing. Unless we talk to a manager in the company, we don't know what these people do. People in the HR department say, I have no idea what that person does. I know their title. I'm looking at a piece of paper that it was put up on Dice, but I don't really know what this job is, so I don't know how to pay it. And then we'll look at it and say, oh, we know exactly what this job is, and then we're able to tell them exactly what to pay, and we can even give them the job description for it. So that's how we sort of put the fires out in companies. But what we discovered is an interesting thing, that you can apply architecture principles to managing people, and it's interesting. We've applied architecture to data. We've applied it to technical architectures. We've been architecting for years, but HR has never architected one damn thing. Until we found, of all things, a consulting firm, a very large, well-known consulting firm, had 350,000 people around the world, 68 countries. And they said, well, we only do 4 things. And I said, what do you mean you only do 4 things? You have 350,000 people. They said, oh, we have a lot of job titles, but in this company, we're either project managers, we're architects, we're consultants, and we have a smattering of sort of technology specialists. But we only do 4 things. I said, that's really brilliant. That you've managed the chaos by saying everybody fits into one of 4 buckets. And then from there, they have an architecture bucket. I said, well, how many titles do you have? They said, oh, we have like 40 different architect titles. But we have a standard for what architects do anywhere in the world. And from that standard, we build descriptions of the jobs. Clearly, we know that the information architects are doing different things than the solution architects, from the network architects, from the security architects, but they're all architects. So they had this brilliant system for cutting through all that, and it took us about 8 years to figure out how to take what they're doing and apply it to other industries, that are not consulting, because consultants can do all kinds of stuff that you can't do. And we started doing this about 5 or 6 years ago, and it just worked. And comp is a big part of that. The idea is you don't need to be using skills pay if your HR people have architected, their HR systems and their pay systems. If they've architected it, you wouldn't need skills pay. Skills pay is usually a sign to us that something's wrong in the company. If you're having to pay people for skills, you're doing some kind of. You should be paying these people properly in salary. You shouldn't have to pay them anymore. But the fact is again, there's so much variation in jobs now. It's very, very difficult. But it's all about this. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail, but I put some slides in here just to tell you that there are solutions, and we've built this into many companies, just applying regular old architecture principles to people. We're trying to do it in a county government now in California that is 100% unionized. And we don't know if you can architect a collective bargaining agreement, frankly. I don't know if you can, but we're giving it a shot. But so far, it has actually worked. These are actual cases where we've been able to build training and development practices, to be able to get people paid appropriately. We go into companies where 40% of the people are salary compressed. Salary compression of 40% of their workforce. By the time we're done with it, it's probably 5% at the most. And yet they haven't had to budget any more money. They've just moved money around. Part of it is by, it doesn't require more money. It requires the use of money differently. That's what it requires. And, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does any of this improve the job satisfaction?
Well, that's interesting because what we're doing after these things come in is we wait about 18 months, 2 years, and if they run like Gallup, job satisfaction or engagement studies, yeah, we get those answers. And people are a lot happier. In general, yeah, people, because the whole point of architecting is you're showing people career possibilities for them where they've never had any kind of career progression program. Part of architecting is you show people, you don't necessarily have to go up. You can go over there. You can run your career like that. And so it really focuses it's not for us to tell them. Their managers get together and figure out exactly, how they want to cross-train people. They've never been asked these questions before, but literally managers get in the room and do this stuff. And when they're done with it, they tend to say to us, we don't know why our management never asked us to have these meetings before, because we really need to be talking more about how the various parts fit together. We do from a systems point of view, but we haven't from a human capital point of view, with the exception of special projects. Special projects get a lot of attention where you can put together an interesting group of, mix of skills and things. Talk about running a whole organization where you're running every project on the same principles and not giving special attention to special projects. It's very interesting. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say about mastering your next move. Generally speaking, when we talk to people about software engineering and development, they tend to say many things to us, but they're looking for full stack. No matter what they're doing, they want full stack. They want anyone who can extract insights from massive data sets, anybody who can do that. And they want people to think strategically. Now, it's interesting. This is not what people wanted 10 years ago. They want people to think strategically. So when we say, well, what kind of people do you meet that think strategically? And they say, oh, very simple. A developer who went back and took business courses in marketing because they wanted to basically work in the marketing department and be the support for software development and all platforms in that, or finance and accounting or logistics or stuff. That's an obvious example. But people that have gone and gotten to know a segment of the customer population or a future segment, and they've gotten to know that function, how people are using the products, how they're supported, what the likely moves are going to be. I mean, they basically become hybrids. Now, many of you already are. So I'm talking to an audience that I think already understands this hybrid. But I think thinking strategically generally means can do what they do in the context of a specific solution to a specific group of people that we want to purchase. We want them to purchase our products. That's basically it. It's a little more than that. In big data, it's in-depth on business intelligence, analytics, machine language tools, ETL, it can aggregate huge data sets again. Here's massive data sets again. Core BD skills, there are a lot of them, Hadoop, R, Spark, frameworks. You can see the chart that I gave you, and you can see what they all look like. DevOps is interesting. DevOps is, again, it was very difficult for us to create a standard job description for DevOps because every DevOps person you meet is different. But we started putting together kind of an aggregate of who all these DevOps people would be, that you didn't need to actually specialize in any one area, but you could specialize in 2 or 3 of these. So I put together a list right here for you for DevOps foundation skills. Took it right out of our job descriptions. And these are, I would say, pretty hot tools, pretty in demand for most companies hiring in DevOps. Open source, Ruby, Python, Node.js, AngularJS, GitHub. Popular, again, not the whole list, but I call those out. Mobile, there again, business savvy, know your customer, access and orchestration of data, scalability, and they're dying for UX, UI experts. They can't get enough of those. Security, what's come up more or less is adaptive app security and secure coding, which we hear about all the time. Cloud, Azure, AWS. They want, again, that business orientation. There it is. And IoT. So that's how to get a hold of me. If you want a copy of the presentation, give me a business card. I'll send it to you. And thanks for coming.